Hi there everyone, this is Hina here from Angels in Heels, and for this week the theme is Power of the Mind. Now this is a very impromptu thing, and people who don't know Hitesh is my husband and we've been together for 24 years now. One thing I did know about Hitesh, like he is quite resilient, and when he does put his mind to it, to any of the projects, he goes ahead with it, he goes through. So there's this little story that I'd like Hitesh to share with us from 2004 when he
a long time ago.
Seems like a really long time ago. When he ran the London Marathon, which is 43 kilometers, and he ran the London Marathon at that time, and back then he was not as fit as he is now. I know for sure he had a knee injury, and I do know this for sure that I wasn't very happy. None of the members of our family were happy that he was running it because he had this knee injury and the doctors had advised him not to run it. And yet, yes. Hitesh being Hitesh, he went ahead, and let Hitesh share the rest of the story with us. So, hello. Hello, stranger.
It's a bit weird being here because I've been in quite a few interviews, but being interviewed by your wife, that's scary.
All right, Hitesh. So tell me, we all said don't do the London Marathon because it could have harmed your knee. I mean, you did go for the surgery and everything. You were told by your GP not to. Why did you?
I think it actually it was a bit of an ego thing actually, because it started off, if you remember, at our breakfast table. Okay. And we were sitting there, and all of a sudden I said, I'm thinking of running the marathon. And at that time I was unfit, a bit overweight, and you laughed at me in one of those, there's no way you can do this. Yeah. And it became an ego thing. It was like,
you had to prove.
I had to prove to her that I can do this.
Yeah, just because I said you couldn't.
And you can do that when you're 34. You don't really do that when you're my age now. But when you're 34, your ego takes over, and all of a sudden you want to do something even though someone says you can't. And that's how it kind of started. But there was also an emotional connection as well. And I think that emotional connection pulled me more towards doing it. So I ran for the Royal London Society for the Blind, and my father was blind, so it had this emotional attachment. So when you're attached emotionally to something, you don't think necessarily rationally. And once that decision was made that I was going to do that for that particular charity, I think I had worked out that that's what I was going to do.
So how is running for the blind and London Marathon connected?
It wasn't connected. It was, what just happened was I said I was going to run the marathon, and then I went for a run, and I didn't last for like more than 3 minutes. And I came back and I was absolutely exhausted, and I'm thinking, hold on, if you can't run for 3 minutes, how are you going to be able to run for 6 hours? And we had
That's right, yeah.
And I realized I needed a reason to do it if I was going to actually do it. And that's when I got in touch with the Royal London Society for the Blind. And at that time you had to apply. And they said, oh, apply and then we'll see if you qualify and all the rest of it. And I just turned around and said, look, what do I have to do to make you take me on? Because at that time there were so many applications going to the London Marathon, you didn't always get through. So I needed what was called a golden ticket. And so they said, yeah, I needed to raise something like $600 or £600 at that time. And I just turned around and said, look, you take me on today and I'll raise £3,000 for you. And that's how it kind of just carried on.
Okay, and so whatever you raised, from what I recall, we actually donated that to Royal London Society for the Blind.
In the end, we raised about £16,000.
I forgot the figures. Okay, now initially the first trial run that you did, or your first practice run, the very day one, I know you were exhausted after 3 minutes of running. So how did you manage to complete the marathon in 5 hours? What was it? 5
It's
hours?
about five, just over 5 hours.
Just over 5 hours. And I remember waiting on the end line, your finishing line, and I was way more exhausted than you were. You were fresh as like, you could have done another 10Ks quite easily. So what kept you going?
Well, I think I'm going to go a stage back because, yes, I had this knee injury and I was told not to do it. My medical advice was not to do it. But when we're talking about mind over matter, I had absolutely convinced myself that no matter what happens, nothing was going to happen to my knee.
Right.
And throughout all that 6 or 7 months of training, it was true, nothing happened to my knee. I picked up injuries everywhere else, but I never picked up an injury on my knee because I had convinced myself that nothing will happen to my knee. The other thing that happened was during that marathon, a week before, I actually pulled my hamstring. I didn't quite pull it, but I stretched it in a way which was not good. So I ran with that. And during the marathon, at mile 6, which is about 11 kilometers in, I picked up a blister. And to this day, I still can't understand that because I never picked up any of the blisters. But on the day of the marathon, I picked up a blister. And I remember at that time when I was speaking to the first aid guy, and he said, "Oh, you've picked up a blister. It's only 11 Ks in. You might need to see how you go going forward." But when I was running on that day, the only thing that was going through my mind was not letting people down. And when I mean not letting people down, there were a number of people around me, which I will call my team. So obviously you, family, the charity that I was running for. And don't forget, there was an awful lot of people who donated and believed in my run. And while I was doing that run, it was like, I cannot let these people down. And when we're talking about mind over matter and resilience, if you can build a team around you, no matter what you're trying to do, it could be losing weight, or it could be whatever you want to do, exercising, or whatever you decide you want to do, if you can build a team around you, they will support you, they will help you, they will push you. And I'm absolutely convinced that if I didn't have that sort of accountability and that support, I wouldn't have made it to the day, because I would have pulled out ages ago. And so if you, when we're, and that was something I learned, which I've used throughout all my years so far, is if you can build that supporting team around you, you're able to do a lot more than you think you can do.
Even if it's like a buddy, like just the one person who you hold accountable.
Yeah, it's just an accountable buddy, anybody, just someone who can just push you along, help you, keep you there, and you somehow feel that you are not necessarily obligated, but you can't necessarily let them down.
So did you, so I remember you finished your run, the 43 kilometers, and you were perfectly fine, you were fresh, whatnot, like...
We went to the pub afterwards.
We went to the pub afterwards. So, I mean, you've already shared what you know, what your message is. But if you were to just put it in like a sentence, what would you say? What's the message that you want to give to the viewers? If it was to really shorten it down to just one sentence.
You can do a hell of a lot more than you think you can do.
Okay.
And that's in one sentence.
Yeah.
When after that 3 minutes, I didn't believe I could do something.
Yeah,
and
I
yet,
could either.
And yet, not only did it happen, and I was very, very happy. In fact, I would say, we look at our lives and we will, looking back, there's probably only 10 or 15 things you will actually really remember that you will never forget.
Yeah.
And that London Marathon day, I will never forget.
Yeah, it's one of the highlights of your life.
It's one of my highlights of my life, yes.
Right. Which you didn't think you could do.
Which
I certainly didn't think you could. So, yeah. So that's a little story that we wanted to share for our theme, Power of the Mind. Woohoo!
Thank you.
Thank you for listening. Thank you. Thank you for watching. Cheers. Bye-bye.